The crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, sending fragments skittering across my parents' pristine dining room. My sister Victoria's face was twisted with rage, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at me like a weapon. "You'll die alone," she screamed, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "No one will ever want you. You're nothing but a burden to this family." I stood there, my hands trembling slightly as 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. My father's business associates, my mother's charity friends, Victoria's influencer crowd, all watching as she delivered what she believed would be the final blow to whatever dignity I had left. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft tinkle of the last piece of glass settling on the floor. I didn't cry. I'd learned years ago that tears only gave them more ammunition. Instead, I carefully set down my own glass, untouched, on the side table. "Excuse me," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the hurricane in my chest. "I need some air." As I walked toward the French doors leading to the garden, I heard my mother's theatrical sigh. "Really, Sophia, must you always make everything about you?" The laughter that followed felt like needles against my skin. The cool October air hit my face as I stepped outside, and for a moment, I could breathe again. The garden lights cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, and I found myself drawn to the old stone bench near the fountain, the one place on this entire estate where I'd ever felt peace. If you're still watching, it's probably because you know what it feels like to be the family disappointment, the one who never quite fits into the perfect picture. Trust me, what happens next will show you that sometimes the people who call you worthless are the ones who should be worried about their own worth. I sat there for exactly 17 minutes. I know because I counted each one, using the meditation technique my therapist had taught me to manage the anxiety that came with family gatherings. 17 minutes before I heard the click of heels on stone and knew my reprieve was over. But it wasn't Victoria or my mother. It was my grandmother's nurse, Helena, a woman who'd been with our family for 3 years, but whom I'd rarely spoken to beyond polite greetings. She was carrying something, a leather portfolio that looked older than the house itself. "Miss Sophia," she said, her accent still thick despite her years in America. "Your grandmother, before she passed, she told me to give this to you, but only when—" She paused, glancing back at the house where the party continued without me. "Only when they finally showed you who they really are." My grandmother Eleanor had died 6 months ago. The reading of her will had been another family spectacle where I'd received exactly what everyone expected: nothing. Well, technically, I'd received her collection of old books, which Victoria had laughed about for weeks. "Even dead, Grandma knew you were only good for hiding in dusty libraries," she'd said. "I don't understand," I said, taking the portfolio with hands that had started trembling again, but for a different reason this time. Helena's weathered face softened. "Your grandmother saw everything, child. Everything. She knew what they did to you, what they've always done. But she also knew something they didn't." She squeezed my shoulder gently. "Read it tonight, all of it. And remember, your grandmother was many things, but she was never wrong about people." Before I could ask anything more, Helena was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the garden path that led to the staff quarters. I sat there, holding the portfolio, feeling its weight. Not just physical, but something more. Something that felt like possibility. The party inside was reaching its crescendo. I could hear Victoria's laugh, that practiced, tinkling sound she'd perfected for her hundreds of thousands of followers. She was probably telling the story of my latest failure, how I'd lost my job at the small publishing house last month. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been let go because the company was folding, not because of my performance. My boss had actually cried when she told me, said I was the best editor she'd ever had. But that didn't fit the family narrative of Sophia the screw-up, so I'd kept quiet. You see, in the Winters family, there were roles assigned from birth. Victoria, older by 3 years, was the golden child. Everything she touched turned to social media gold. Her lifestyle brand, Victoria's Secret Garden, yes, really, had just hit 1 million followers. She was engaged to Harrison Blackwood, heir to a hotel fortune, and their wedding was being covered by 3 major magazines. My brother James, the middle child, was the business prodigy. At 27, he was already a partner at our father's investment firm, the youngest in the company's history. He had the corner office, the Porsche, the waterfront condo, and the rotating cast of model girlfriends who my mother pretended to disapprove of while secretly loving the prestige they brought. And then there was me, Sophia, the youngest at 22, the one who'd studied literature instead of business, who'd rather spend Saturday nights with a book than at a gala, who'd chosen to work at a small publishing house instead of joining the family firm. The disappointment, the burden, the one who, according to tonight's proclamation, would die alone. The portfolio felt warm in my hands, as if it had been waiting for me. I stood up, brushing off my simple black dress, another point of contention, as I'd refused to wear the designer gown my mother had selected for tonight. "You look like a funeral director," Victoria had sneered when I'd arrived. Now, walking back toward the house with grandmother's mystery gift, I felt more like an executor of a will that hadn't been read yet. I didn't go back to the party. Instead, I slipped through the side entrance, the one the staff used, and made my way to my room. The smallest bedroom in the family wing, of course. It had been a storage room until I was born, hastily converted when my parents realized they were having a 3rd child. The accident, my mother had called me once, after too much wine at Christmas. My room was my sanctuary, the one place I'd been allowed to decorate myself. While the rest of the house looked like a spread from Architectural Digest, my room was warm and lived in. Bookshelves lined every wall, filled not with first editions meant to impress, but with worn paperbacks I'd actually read. The reading chair by the window was shabby and comfortable, bought from a thrift store with my first paycheck. This was where I belonged, not in the glittering showcase downstairs. I locked the door, a habit born from years of Victoria barging in to deliver her latest critique of my existence, and sat on my bed with the portfolio. My hands were steady now. Whatever was in here, it couldn't be worse than what I'd just experienced downstairs. The leather was soft with age, secured with a simple brass clasp that opened with a gentle click. Inside, the first thing I saw was a letter in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting, elegant but bold, just like she'd been. "My dearest Sophia," it began, and I had to pause. In 22 years, I couldn't remember anyone in my family ever calling me dearest. If you are reading this, then Helena has judged the time to be right, and knowing Helena's impeccable judgment, I trust that means your family has finally crossed a line that even your generous heart cannot forgive. I am sorry, my dear one, that I could not protect you from them while I lived. But perhaps what I am about to share with you will be protection enough for the life you have ahead of you. I shifted on the bed, pulling my legs up under me, the same way I used to sit when grandmother would tell me stories during her visits. She'd been the only one who never criticized my choice to study literature, who never rolled her eyes when I talked about books, who never made me feel like I was somehow defective for being different from Victoria and James. The letter continued. "First, let me tell you something about your family that they have worked very hard to hide, even from themselves. Your father's wealth, the fortune that pays for that ridiculous house, and your mother's endless surgeries, and your siblings' luxury lifestyles. None of it was earned by him. Every penny came from me." I read that line 3 times. My father, Richard Winters, was known throughout Boston as a brilliant investor, a self-made man who'd built an empire from nothing. It was the family legend, told at every gathering, written about in business magazines, the foundation of his entire identity. Your grandfather, the letter went on, was a kind but foolish man who lost everything in bad investments when your father was young. I was the one with the money, inherited from my grandmother, a woman who was decades ahead of her time, and who built a fortune in railroads when women weren't even allowed to vote. I saved your grandfather from bankruptcy, but the condition was that it remained our secret. Male pride, you understand. Your father grew up believing the recovery was his father's doing, and I let him believe it because I loved my husband, flaws and all. When your father started his investment firm, it was with my money. Every brilliant deal he made in those early years was one I had researched and approved. The connections he leveraged were mine, cultivated over decades. But again, I let him believe it was all him. I thought I was being kind. I see now that I was merely enabling the creation of a monster, a man so convinced of his own superiority that he would raise his children to be just as blind. The paper trembled in my hands. Everything I'd been told about our family, every story about my father's genius, every lecture about how I was failing to live up to the family legacy, all of it built on a lie. But you, Sophia, you were different from the moment you were born. You had my grandmother's eyes, not just the color, but the way of seeing through the surface to what lies beneath. Your siblings inherited your parents' need for validation, their hunger for admiration, their willingness to step on others to climb higher. But you inherited something far more valuable. I turned the page and found not more letter, but a document, a legal document. My eyes scanned it quickly, then slowly, then again, because I couldn't quite believe what I was reading. The Elara Foundation, established in 1952 by Eleanor Margaret Winters, née Hartley, with assets totaling, I had to count the zeros 3 times, $870 million. The family knows nothing of this, the letter resumed on the next page. It has been managed by a firm in Switzerland for decades, growing quietly, funding charities and scholarships and small presses. Yes, my dear, including the one you worked for. I've been watching over you in my own way. My heart stopped. The publishing house where I'd been so happy, where I'd felt valued for the first time in my life, grandmother had been behind it? But now, my dearest girl, it's time for you to know the truth. The foundation is yours. It has always been yours. I set it up in your name the day you were born, though the lawyers were instructed to keep this from you until either my death or your 25th birthday, whichever came last. However, I added a provision. If Helena judges that your family has caused you sufficient pain, she has the authority to activate the transfer early. The papers you need are all here. The lawyers in Geneva are expecting your call. The number is in the back of this portfolio, along with account information and contacts for the various properties. Properties? I flipped to the back of the portfolio, finding a neat list. A villa in Monaco, an apartment in Paris, a cottage in the Scottish Highlands, a penthouse in New York, each one purchased by the foundation, maintained and waiting. I know this is overwhelming, the letter continued, and I know your first instinct will be to doubt, to assume this is some mistake or cruel joke. It is neither. This is my gift to you, not just the money, though I hope that will give you the freedom to live as you choose. But more than that, this is my way of telling you what I should have said while I lived. You are not now, nor have you ever been, the failure your family paints you as. You are the only one among them who inherited what actually matters: kindness, authenticity, and the courage to be yourself in a family that demands performance above truth. The helicopter will come for you tomorrow morning at 9. Yes, my dear. I've arranged everything. Helena has been coordinating with the lawyers for months, waiting for the right moment. They tell me the villa in Monaco is particularly beautiful in October, and there's a writing room with a view of the sea that I think you'll love. I looked at the clock on my nightstand. It was just past 11. In 10 hours, a helicopter would come for me? You don't have to leave forever, the letter said, as if grandmother had anticipated my thoughts. But I want you to know that you can, that you have choices, that the life your family has tried to force you into, small, apologetic, always less than, that life is not your only option. I have one more thing to tell you, and this is perhaps the most important. Your mother's maiden name was not Pemberton, as she claims. She was born Mary Smith in a trailer park in Nevada. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, except that she's built her entire identity on a lie, looking down on others for having less prestigious backgrounds. Your father knows this. It's why she's so desperate to keep you all in line, so terrified that someone might see through the facade. Victoria's influencer success? Your father has been paying for followers, buying her features in magazines, bribing brands to work with her. Without his money, she'd have perhaps 1,000 real followers, if that. James's partnership at the firm? He nearly bankrupted 3 major accounts with his reckless decisions. Your father covered the losses and promoted him to keep up appearances. And you, the failure. You're the only one who has ever succeeded at anything real. That publishing house job you loved, you got it on your own merit. The authors you worked with have been sending letters to the house, asking where you went, saying you were the best editor they'd ever had. I know because I've been keeping track. You were never the failure, my dearest Sophia. You were the only success, the only one who didn't need lies and money to prop you up, the only one who was real. I was crying now, the tears I'd held back for years finally falling. Not tears of sadness, but of relief, validation, the feeling of finally being seen. There was a knock at my door, soft, tentative. Not the demanding pound of Victoria or the sharp rap of my mother. I wiped my eyes and opened it to find Helena standing there with a cup of tea. "I thought you might need this," she said gently, "and perhaps some help packing?" "You knew," I said. "All this time, you knew." She nodded. "Your grandmother interviewed me personally for this job, not to take care of her. She was healthy as a horse until the very end. But to watch over you, to wait for the right moment. And tonight, was it? When your sister said those words, in front of all those people, and your parents did nothing to stop her. Yes. Your grandmother's exact instructions were to wait until they showed you clearly that they would never see your worth. Tonight, they did. I looked back at the portfolio spread across my bed, at the life waiting for me in those pages. "I don't know if I can do this. Just leave." Helena smiled, the first real smile I'd ever seen from her. "Your grandmother left you one more thing, a video message. It's on a USB drive in the portfolio. Perhaps watch it before you decide." She left me alone with my tea and my grandmother's gifts. I found the USB drive tucked into a small pocket in the portfolio. My laptop was already on my desk. I'd been working on some freelance editing to make ends meet since losing my job. The drive contained a single video file. Grandmother appeared on the screen, looking exactly as I remembered her from our last conversation, just a week before she died. She was in her study, wearing the pearl necklace she never took off, her silver hair perfectly styled as always. "Hello, my dearest girl," she said, and her voice wrapped around me like a warm blanket. "If you're watching this, then you're probably sitting in that terrible small room they stuck you in, wondering if this is all real. It is. Every word, every dollar, every opportunity, all real." She leaned forward slightly, as if she could see me through the screen. "I know you're scared. I know you think you don't deserve this. That's what they've trained you to believe. But let me tell you something about deserving, Sophia. Your sister believes she deserves the world because she's pretty and knows how to perform for cameras. Your brother believes he deserves success because he was born with the right chromosomes and the family name. Your parents believe they deserve respect because they have money they didn't even earn. But you've never assumed you deserved anything. You've worked for everything you have. You've been kind when they were cruel. You've been honest when they lied. You've been yourself when they demanded you be someone else. If anyone deserves a chance at real happiness, it's you. The helicopter will take you to Monaco. There's a staff at the villa who've been waiting to meet you. Good people, kind people, nothing like what you're used to. There's also a publishing house in Paris that's interested in meeting you. Not because of your money. They don't know about that yet. But because I sent them some of your work. Those short stories you've been writing late at night when you think no one knows. I had Helena copy them from your computer. I'm sorry for the invasion of privacy, but I'm not sorry for the result. They want to publish them, Sophia. They think you have real talent. I paused the video. My stories? The ones I'd never shown anyone? Never thought were good enough? Grandmother had sent them to a publisher? I don't expect you to forgive me for keeping this from you for so long, Grandmother continued when I pressed play again. I thought I was protecting you by letting you grow up without the burden of wealth, letting you develop your character without the corruption that money so often brings. But I see now that I also left you vulnerable to their cruelty, and for that I am deeply sorry. But now you have a choice. You can stay there, in that house where they will continue to diminish you, where Victoria will continue to mock you, where your parents will continue to see you as a disappointment. Or you can leave, not forever, unless you want to, but long enough to discover who you are when you're not being told you're nothing. I've lived a long life, Sophia, and I've learned that the only real failure is living someone else's idea of your life instead of your own. Don't make that mistake. Be brave, my dearest girl. Be brave enough to choose yourself. The video ended. I sat there in the silence of my room, hearing the party winding down below. Victoria's loud goodbye to someone, my mother's artificial laugh, my father's booming voice making some business deal even at a social gathering. I looked around my small room, at the books that had been my only friends, at the desk where I'd written stories I'd never thought were good enough to share. Then I looked at the portfolio, at the deeds and account numbers, and the photo of a villa overlooking the Mediterranean. Helena knocked again. Miss Sophia, if you're leaving, we should pack now. The helicopter company called to confirm. They'll be here at 9 sharp. They called? I asked, opening the door. Just now. They wanted to make sure you knew to pack light. Anything you need can be purchased in Monaco, and the lawyers from Geneva will meet you at the villa tomorrow afternoon to go over everything. It was real. All of it was real. What will I tell them? I asked. My family, I mean. When they wake up and I'm gone? Helena's expression hardened slightly. The truth, if you'd like, or nothing at all. Your grandmother's suggestion was to leave a letter, short and simple. She even drafted one for you if you'd like to use it. She handed me another envelope. Inside, in grandmother's handwriting, was a single paragraph. By the time you read this, I will be gone. Not missing, not in trouble, simply gone to live my own life. Grandmother left me more than you know, including the freedom to leave. I wish you all the best in your lives, as I hope you'll wish me the best in mine. Please don't contact me. When and if I'm ready to reconnect, I'll reach out. Until then, know that I am safe, I am provided for, and for the first time in my life, I am free. Sophia. I looked at the letter, at Helena, at the portfolio on my bed. Then I made my decision. Help me pack, I said. Just the essentials. And I paused, then smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. Pack all my books. I don't care if it's impractical. I'm not leaving them behind. Helena smiled back. Your grandmother said you'd say that. There's already a library waiting for you in Monaco, but she knew you'd want your own books. The helicopter can handle the weight. We packed through the night. My clothes. The simple, comfortable ones I actually liked, not the designer pieces my mother had forced on me. My laptop with all my writing. My journals, filled with years of thoughts I'd never dared speak aloud. The photo album from when grandmother used to take me on secret adventures, to bookshops and museums and quiet cafes where we talk about literature and life. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I heard movement in the house. My family waking up, preparing for another day of their carefully curated lives. Victoria would probably do a morning workout for her Instagram stories. James would head to the office to move money around and call it genius. My parents would have their usual silent breakfast, scrolling through their phones, occasionally commenting on other people's perceived failures. At 8:30, I stood in my room one last time. Helena had taken my bags down to the garden where the helicopter would land. I'd left the letter on my pillow, where they'd find it eventually. Maybe after lunch when they finally wondered why I hadn't emerged to be their verbal punching bag. I was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, clothes Victoria would call aggressively plain, but they were comfortable, and they were mine. Around my neck was grandmother's pearl necklace, which Helena had given me that morning. "She wanted you to have this," she'd said. She wore it every day because it reminded her of who she really was, beneath all the pretense. She thought it might do the same for you. The sound came first, the distinctive whoop, whoop, whoop of helicopter blades. Then the wind, making the trees in the garden sway. I watched from my window as it descended, a sleek black machine that looked like something from a movie. The pilot stepped out, a woman in a crisp uniform who looked up at the house and checked her watch. That's when the chaos started. Victoria burst into my room without knocking, as usual. "What the hell is that?" she demanded, pointing at the helicopter. Then she saw my empty bookshelves, my packed desk. What's going on?" "I'm leaving," I said simply. "Leaving? What do you mean leaving? For what, another pathetic job interview?" "No, just leaving." She saw the letter on my pillow and snatched it before I could stop her. As she read it, her face went from confused to shocked to furious. "This is a joke," she said. "Grandmother left you something? What, her moldy book collection?" "Something like that," I said, moving toward the door. She grabbed my arm. "You can't just leave. What will people think? What will I tell Harrison's family? That my sister just disappeared like some crazy person?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The perfect makeup she wore even first thing in the morning. The designer pajamas that cost more than most people's rent. The desperation in her eyes, not for me to stay, but for her image to remain intact. "Tell them the truth," I said, pulling my arm free, "that you told me I'd die alone, and I decided to go find out if that's true." I left her standing there, mouth open, as I walked down the hallway. My parents were in the breakfast room, and they looked up in confusion as I passed. "Sophia?" my mother called. "Where are you going at this hour?" "Away," I said, not stopping. My father stood up. "Don't be ridiculous. We have the Blackwood lunch today. You're expected to attend." "I'm sure you'll manage without me," I said, reaching the front door. "You always have." The helicopter was waiting, its blades still spinning. Helena stood beside it with my bags already loaded. As I walked across the lawn, I heard them behind me, all of them now, shouting and demanding explanations. But their words were lost in the sound of the rotors, in the rush of wind, in the beating of my own heart. The pilot helped me in, showed me how to buckle the harness, handed me a headset. As we lifted off, I looked down at them, my family, standing in a cluster on the perfect lawn, looking up in disbelief. Victoria was taking a video on her phone, probably trying to figure out how to spin this for her followers. James was on his phone too, likely calling someone to figure out what was happening. My parents just stood there, my mother's hand at her throat, my father's face red with anger or embarrassment or both. They got smaller and smaller as we rose, until they were just dots on a mansion that looked like a dollhouse, on an estate that looked like a miniature model, in a life that had never really been mine. "First time in a helicopter?" the pilot asked through the headset. "First time doing a lot of things," I replied. She smiled. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. She planned all of this, you know, every detail, even insisted on a female pilot, said you'd had enough of men thinking they knew better than you." As we flew over Boston, heading toward the coast and then beyond, I pulled out my phone. I had 17 missed calls already, dozens of texts. "Victoria, this is insane. You're having a breakdown. Come back now." "James, whatever you think you're doing, you're going to regret it." My mother, "You're embarrassing the entire family." My father, "If you leave, don't bother coming back." I turned off my phone. The flight to Monaco took 8 hours with a fuel stop in Iceland. The pilot, whose name was Sarah, told me about my grandmother during the flight, how she'd interviewed her personally, how she'd been planning this for years, how she'd said, "My granddaughter is going to need an escape route, and I want it to be memorable." She talked about you all the time, Sarah said, how proud she was of you, how you were the only one in your family who was real. She said you had a gift for seeing stories in everything, for finding beauty where others saw ordinary things. She said that? I asked, tears pricking my eyes. All the time. She also said you doubt yourself, that they'd trained you to think you were worth less than you are. But she believed you'd figure it out once you were free of them. Free. Such a simple word, but I'd never really understood what it meant until now, flying over the Atlantic in a helicopter my grandmother had sent for me, toward a life I couldn't yet imagine. We landed in Monaco as the sun was setting, painting the Mediterranean in shades of gold and pink. The villa was on a cliff overlooking the sea, a stunning white structure with arched windows and terraces that seemed to float above the water. It wasn't ostentatious like my parents' house. It was elegant, understated, perfect. The staff was waiting. Just 3 people, not the army my parents employed. Marie, the housekeeper, who hugged me like I was her own daughter returning home. Jacques, the groundskeeper and driver, who carried my bags and told me about the garden paths that led down to a private beach. And Celeste, the cook, who had prepared a simple but perfect dinner and told me that my grandmother had sent her all my favorite recipes. How did she know? I asked, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of it all. She paid attention, Marie said simply. To everything about you. She said you were the only one worth watching. The lawyers arrived the next morning, 3 of them from one of Geneva's most prestigious firms. They spread papers across the dining room table, accounts, investments, properties, charitable foundations. The number was even bigger than what I'd seen in the portfolio. Nearly $1 billion, carefully invested and managed for decades. Your grandmother was a financial genius. The lead lawyer, Mr. Hartman, said, she turned her inheritance into this through careful, brilliant investing. She also specified that you should know. Your family has no claim on any of this. It's all in trusts and foundations that they can't touch, even if they tried to claim some sort of familial right. What about the charities? I asked, looking at the list of organizations the foundation supported. That's up to you now. You can continue funding them, change them, add new ones. Your grandmother left you complete control with only one stipulation, that you use the money to live authentically and to help others do the same. That afternoon, I sat on the terrace with my laptop, looking out at the sea. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, had over 200 messages. I didn't read them. Instead, I opened a new document and began to write. Not a story this time, but a letter to the publishing house in Paris that grandmother had contacted. They'd sent an email asking when I could meet with them. I wrote back, saying I could come next week, that I was very interested in discussing my work with them. Then I opened another document and began a new story. About a girl who thought she was nothing, discovering she was everything. About the lies families tell and the truths they hide. About helicopters and hidden fortunes, and grandmothers who plan the perfect escape. The words flowed like they never had before. Without the constant criticism, without the voice in my head telling me I wasn't good enough, the story poured out of me. I wrote until the sun set again, until Marie brought me dinner on the terrace, until the stars came out over the Mediterranean. That's when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Sophia? It was Harrison, Victoria's fiancé. Thank God, your family's going crazy. Victoria's been crying all day. She says you've had some kind of breakdown, that you've run off with some man or joined a cult or something. I'm fine, Harrison, I said. Better than fine, actually. But where are you? Why did you leave like that? I thought about how to answer. Harrison wasn't a bad person, just boring and shallow, perfect for Victoria. I left because I finally could, because staying was killing me slowly, and I decided I wanted to live. But your family? My family told me I would die alone. I decided to test that theory. There was a pause. Victoria didn't mean it. You know how she gets. Yes, I do. That's why I left. Will you come back? For the wedding at least? I looked out at the sea, at the lights of Monte Carlo twinkling below, at the life spreading out before me. I don't think so. But I wish you both the best. I hung up before he could respond. The next few days passed in a blur of discovery. I explored the villa, finding treasures grandmother had left for me. First editions of my favorite books, photographs from her own youth that I'd never seen, a writing desk that had belonged to her grandmother, the railroad heiress who'd started it all. I walked down to the private beach, swam in the crystal clear water, and felt the sun on my skin without worrying about how I looked in a swimsuit compared to Victoria. I ate when I was hungry, slept when I was tired, wrote when the words came. I was learning to live by my own rhythm, not the demanding schedule of family obligations. The meeting in Paris was scheduled for Thursday. Jacques drove me in the villa's car, a understated but elegant Mercedes. The publishing house was in the Marais, in a beautiful old building with exposed wooden beams and windows overlooking a courtyard. The editor, Madame Dubois, was nothing like I'd expected. She was young, maybe 35, with wild curly hair and paint stains on her fingers. I make art in my spare time, she explained, noticing my glance. It helps me understand the visual nature of storytelling. Your grandmother knew this about me. It's one of the reasons she chose our house for your work. She chose you? I asked. Oh yes, she researched dozens of publishers before contacting us. She said you needed people who would understand your voice, not try to change it into something more commercial. She pulled out a folder. I've read all your stories multiple times now. They're extraordinary, Sophia. The way you capture the quiet desperations of family life, the small cruelties that accumulate like poison, but also the unexpected moments of grace. It's masterful. I felt tears in my eyes. No one had ever called my writing masterful before. We want to publish a collection, she continued. 12 of your best stories, with some new ones if you have them. We're thinking a small first run, cultivate critical attention, build your reputation properly. Your grandmother was very clear. No rushing, no pressure, just good work presented well. She really planned everything, I said, still amazed. She loved you very much, Madame Dubois said gently. She talked about you constantly in our correspondence. How you were the only one who inherited her love of books, her eye for truth. She said you had been dimmed by your family, but not extinguished, and she wanted to give you the chance to shine. We talked for 3 hours about the book, about writing, about the stories I was working on. She took me to lunch at a tiny bistro where the owner knew her by name, and the wine was perfect, and the conversation flowed like we'd known each other for years. Can I ask you something? I said as we walked back to her office. Did my grandmother pay you to publish me? Madame Dubois stopped walking and looked at me seriously. She offered. I refused. I told her I would only publish your work if it was genuinely good. She said that's exactly what she hoped I'd say. She smiled. Your work stands on its own merit, Sophia. Never doubt that. On the drive back to Monaco, I finally looked at my messages. The family group chat was a disaster. Victoria had told everyone I'd stolen money from grandmother's estate and run away. James was threatening legal action. My mother was telling everyone I'd always been unstable. My father had written only one message. You're no longer welcome in this family. I thought it would hurt more being disowned. Instead, I felt free, like the last chain had been cut. There was one message that stood out, from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. Sophia, this is Eleanor Blackwood, Harrison's grandmother. I heard about your departure from your sister's rather dramatic telling. I wanted you to know that I never believed their stories about you. You always seemed like the only genuine person in that family. If you ever need a friend who understands complicated families, I'm here. Also, I have a confession. I've been following your blog, the anonymous one you think no one knows about, for years. Your writing is beautiful. Don't let them dim your light. Eleanor B., my anonymous blog, where I'd been posting stories and essays for 3 years under a pseudonym, never telling anyone, never linking it to my real name. How had she known? I called her. "Sophia," she answered immediately. "How wonderful to hear from you. Where are you, my dear?" "Monaco," I said. "In a villa. My grandmother left me." "Eleanor always was full of surprises," she laughed. "Good for her, and good for you for leaving. That house was suffocating you." "How did you know about my blog?" "Your writing style is distinctive, dear. Also, you once posted a story about a grandmother who collected music boxes, and you described one that I'd seen in Eleanor's collection. It wasn't hard to put together." "Does anyone else know?" "Not from me. Though you should know, you have quite a following. Your essay about feeling like a ghost in your own family has been shared thousands of times." Thousands? I'd never checked the analytics, too afraid to see if anyone was reading. We talked for an hour. Eleanor Blackwood, who I'd always thought was just another society matron, turned out to be a former literature professor who'd given it up when she married into the Blackwood family. "Biggest mistake of my life," she said. "Don't make the same one. Don't give up who you are for anyone." That night, I sat on the terrace with my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I wrote a blog post under my real name. For 3 years, I've been writing anonymously about family, about feeling invisible, about the weight of others' expectations. Today, I want to tell you who I am and why I've been hiding. My name is Sophia Winters. If you know that name, it's probably in connection to my family, the investment firm, the social media empire, the charity galas. What you don't know is that in that family, I was the failure, the disappointment, the one who chose books over business, authenticity over performance. Last week, my sister told me I would die alone. This week, I'm living in Monaco, about to publish my first book, discovering that being alone is not the same as being lonely. In fact, I've never felt less alone, now that I'm free to be myself. My grandmother, who died 6 months ago, left me more than money. She left me permission to live my own life. She left me the truth about my family's lies. She left me the chance to discover who I am when I'm not being told I'm nothing. To everyone who has read my words and found comfort in them, who has felt like a ghost in their own family, who has been told they're not enough, you are enough. You have always been enough. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to stay with. Sometimes the life everyone expects you to live isn't the life you're meant to live. Sometimes a helicopter comes to take you away from everything you've known, and you have to be brave enough to get in. I'm still figuring out who I am without my family's voices in my head. But for the first time in my life, I'm excited to find out. I posted it before I could second-guess myself. Then I turned off my laptop and went to bed. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and my phone buzzing incessantly. The blog post had gone viral overnight. 30,000 shares, hundreds of comments from people sharing their own stories of family rejection, of finding themselves, of choosing authenticity over approval. There were also 17 missed calls from Victoria, 12 from James, and a series of increasingly angry texts from my parents. They'd found the blog post. They were threatening to sue me for defamation, for theft, for emotional distress. I called Mr. Hartman in Geneva. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "Your grandmother anticipated this. Everything you wrote is true, and we have documentation to prove it. They can threaten all they want, but they have no legal standing. Also, you might be interested to know that your father's firm is under investigation by the SEC. Apparently, someone sent them evidence of some irregular trading practices. Your grandmother was very thorough in her record keeping." She knew about that too? She knew everything, Miss Winters. She was protecting you by letting them think she was just a harmless old woman, but she was anything but harmless when it came to protecting you. That afternoon, I received a call from a literary agent in New York. She'd read my blog post, looked up my anonymous blog, and wanted to represent me. "You have a unique voice," she said, "and now you have a story that people want to hear. Would you consider writing a memoir alongside your fiction?" A memoir, the full story of growing up as the family disappointment, of discovering the truth, of finding freedom. It terrified me. It also thrilled me. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course, but Sophia, your story could help a lot of people. Sometimes the best revenge against those who tried to silence you is to speak your truth loudly." That evening, I walked down to the beach with a bottle of wine and my grandmother's last letter. I hadn't read the final page yet, saving it for when I felt ready. Now, sitting on the sand watching the sunset, I felt ready. "My dearest Sophia, if you've made it this far, then you've discovered the truth about your family, about the money, about yourself. I hope you're not too angry with me for keeping it from you for so long. I wanted you to develop your character without the burden of wealth, to know who you were before you knew what you had. But now I want to tell you the real secret, the one that matters more than all the money in Switzerland. You were never the failure in your family. You were the only success. While they were learning to perform and pretend, you were learning to be real. While they were building facades, you were building character. While they were collecting followers and clients and society friends, you were collecting stories and truths and genuine connections. Your parents and siblings will never understand this. They've invested too much in their false selves to ever admit they've been living lies. But you, my dear one, you still have the chance to live authentically. The money I've left you is not an inheritance. It's wings. Use them. Fly far from those who would clip them. Find your people, the ones who see your light and want it to shine brighter, not those who try to dim it so theirs seems brighter by comparison. Write your stories. Tell your truths. Love deeply when you find someone worthy of that love. Travel to all the places you've only read about. Take risks. Make mistakes. Live the life that scares you because it's so much bigger than what they told you you deserved. And know that somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, I am watching, and I am so very proud of you. You were always my favorite, Sophia. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real. In a family of performers, you were the only one who forgot to put on a mask. Don't put one on now. The world needs your true face, your real voice, your authentic story. All my love. Grandmother P.S. Check the bottom drawer of the writing desk in your study. I left you one more surprise. I was crying freely now, the letter clutched in my hands, the waves lapping at my feet. When I got back to the villa, I went straight to the study, to the antique writing desk grandmother had left me. In the bottom drawer was a leather journal, and inside the front cover was a note. "For your memoir. Tell the truth, all of it. They can't hurt you anymore. E." The journal was filled with her handwriting. Not a diary, but notes she'd kept about my family over the years, documentation of my father's business dealings, records of the cruel things my mother and siblings had said and done, photos I'd never seen, me at various ages, always reading or writing, always alone at family gatherings while the others clustered together for the cameras. But there were other photos too. Me with grandmother at museums, at bookshops, at the park. Pictures I didn't even know existed, where I was smiling, really smiling, where I looked happy, where I looked like myself. At the very back was a photo I'd never seen before. Grandmother as a young woman, maybe 25, standing in front of a typewriter, smiling at the camera with a look of fierce determination. On the back, in faded ink, Eleanor Hartley, age 24, the day I sold my first story to the Atlantic. They said women couldn't write about business. I proved them wrong. 1952. She'd been a writer. My grandmother had been a writer before she became the investment genius, before she became the society matron, before she became the keeper of everyone's secrets. She'd been like me. I opened my laptop and began to write. Not the memoir, not yet, but a story about grandmothers and granddaughters, about inherited dreams and delayed destinies, about women who hide their light until they find someone to pass the torch to. I wrote until dawn, until Marie brought me coffee and croissants, until my phone battery died from all the calls I was ignoring. I wrote the truest thing I'd ever written, and when I was done, I sent it to Madame Dubois in Paris with a note. For the collection, the title is Inheritance. She replied within an hour. It's perfect. This will be the centerpiece of the collection. That afternoon, a package arrived from Harrison. Inside was a letter from Victoria, written in her perfect handwriting on her personalized stationery. Sophia, I know you hate me right now. I know you think I'm cruel and shallow and all the things you've probably written about me on your secret blog. Yes, I found it. But I'm writing to tell you something you don't know. I'm miserable. I've always been miserable. Every follower, every photo, every perfect moment, it's all empty. I wake up every morning and put on a mask, and I can't take it off anymore. It's become my face. I was cruel to you because you still had the option to be real, and I lost that chance years ago. I'm 25 years old, and I don't know who I am without the camera, without the audience, without the performance. You were right to leave. I wish I had the courage to do the same, but I don't. I'm too invested in this false life to abandon it now. Harrison doesn't love me. He loves Victoria's Secret Garden, the brand. Mom and Dad don't love me. They love having a daughter who makes them look successful. The only person who ever really saw me was grandmother, and she left everything to you because she knew you were the only one strong enough to handle the truth. I would have crumbled. I am crumbling. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself, but I wanted you to know that when I said you'd die alone, I was really talking about myself. I'm surrounded by people all the time, and I've never felt more alone in my life. You won, not because you got the money, but because you got to stay yourself. I lost myself so long ago, I don't even remember what she looked like. Victoria P.S. James is having an affair with his business partner's wife. Dad knows and is covering it up. Mom is addicted to pills. The whole family is falling apart without you there to be our scapegoat. Funny how we needed the failure more than the successes. I read the letter 3 times. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad. Victoria was right. She had lost herself, and unlike me, she didn't have a grandmother who had planned an escape route. I wrote back, a short note. Victoria, it's never too late to find yourself. The mask comes off easier than you think. It just hurts at first, like ripping off a bandage. If you ever find the courage to take it off, I'll be here. Sophia P.S. There's enough room in Monaco for 2 sisters to figure out who they really are. The offer stands whenever you're ready. I didn't expect a response, and I didn't get one. But a week later, Marie told me someone had been calling the villa asking about availability for a retreat from social media. The caller had been asking specifically about whether the villa had good light for painting. Victoria had painted when we were children, before my parents decided it wasn't prestigious enough and pushed her toward modeling and social media instead. I'd forgotten about that until now. Tell them we have excellent light for painting, I said to Marie, and that we're expecting them whenever they're ready to come. The next few months passed in a blur of writing, editing, and discovering who I was when no one was watching. The book came together beautifully. Madame Dubois was a dream editor, pushing me to go deeper while respecting my voice. The publisher designed a beautiful cover, simple, elegant, nothing like the flashy books my family would have expected. I started seeing someone, a sculptor I met at a gallery opening in Nice. His name was Gabriel, and he was nothing like the men my parents would have chosen for me. He was quiet, thoughtful, and he'd actually read my anonymous blog before we met. "You're writing about loneliness in crowds," he said on our first date. "It saved me when I was going through my divorce. It made me realize I wasn't crazy for feeling alone in my marriage." We took things slow. After a lifetime of being told I was unlovable, I had to learn to let someone love me. But Gabriel was patient, and he understood what it was like to come from a family that didn't understand you. His parents had wanted him to be a lawyer. He'd chosen art instead and been disowned for it. "We're orphans by choice," he said one evening as we watched the sunset from the villa's terrace. "It's better than being prisoners by birth." The book, launched in September, almost a year after I'd left Boston in a helicopter. It was a small launch, intimate, at a bookstore in Paris. Madame Dubois had been right to start small. The critics loved it. "A stunning debut," wrote Le Monde. Winters writes with the precision of a surgeon and the heart of a poet. The book sold out its first print run in a week, then the second, then the third. By October, it was being translated into 12 languages. The anonymous blog followers had found it, shared it, championed it. Book clubs picked it up. Literary festivals invited me to speak. And then, on a rainy Thursday in November, almost exactly a year after Victoria had screamed that I would die alone, I got a call from my father. "Sophia," he said, and his voice sounded older, tired. "I'm calling to congratulate you on your book." I said nothing, waiting. "Your mother bought it," he continued. "She didn't want me to know, but I saw it on her nightstand. I read it. And I recognized us in it. All of us. Every cruel word, every dismissive look, every time we made you feel like nothing." He paused. "I also recognized your grandmother in it. The wise woman who sees everything but says nothing until the right moment." "What do you want, Dad?" "The firm is under investigation. James is facing charges. Your mother is in rehab. Victoria hasn't posted on social media in 3 months. She says she's taking a break, but really she just sits in her room and stares at nothing." He took a shaky breath. "We're falling apart, Sophia. The family you left is destroying itself." "That's not my problem anymore." "No, it's not. I'm not calling to ask you to come back or to fix us. I'm calling to tell you that you were right to leave, and that I'm sorry. We had a daughter who was brilliant and kind and talented, and we tried to crush all of that because it didn't fit our image. Your grandmother saw what we were doing, didn't she? That's why she saved you." "Yes." "Is it true, what Victoria says, that grandmother left you enough to live freely?" "Yes." "Good, good. You deserve it. You deserve all of it." He was crying now. My father, who I'd never seen show emotion except anger. "I failed you, Sophia. We all did, and I know it's too late to fix it, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what we did to you, and I see what we lost when we drove you away." "Dad, you were the best of us," he said. "The only real thing in a family of facades, and we threw you away like you were worthless. I'll never forgive myself for that." He hung up before I could respond. That night, I sat with Gabriel and told him about the call. He held me while I cried. Not for the family I'd lost, but for the family we could have been if they'd been different people. If they'd been real instead of performances. "Do you want to see them again?" he asked. "I don't know. Maybe someday, but not yet. I'm still learning who I am without their voices in my head." "And who are you?" he asked, smiling. I thought about it. "I'm a writer. A good one, apparently. I'm someone who loves deeply once I trust. I'm someone who sees stories everywhere. I'm someone who survived a family that tried to erase me and came out whole on the other side." I paused. "I'm Sophia Winters, and I'm enough exactly as I am." He kissed me then, and I realized that Victoria had been wrong about everything. I wasn't going to die alone. I was going to live surrounded by people who saw me, really saw me, and loved what they saw. The memoir came out the following year. It was harder to write than the fiction, requiring me to revisit every painful moment, every cruel word, every time I'd believed them when they said I was nothing. But it was also cathartic, like cleaning out an infected wound. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of emails from people who had similar stories, who had been the scapegoats in their own families, who had been told they were failures for choosing authenticity over performance. I started a foundation with part of grandmother's money, providing scholarships for young people whose families had rejected them for being themselves. Victoria finally came to Monaco 2 years after I'd left. She showed up on a Tuesday morning, no luggage, just the clothes on her back. She'd deleted all her social media accounts, broken off her engagement to Harrison, and told our parents she was done performing. "I want to paint again," she said, standing in the doorway like she wasn't sure she was welcome. "I want to remember who I was before I became their puppet." "The studio has excellent light," I said, stepping aside to let her in. She lived with me for 6 months, painting obsessively, barely speaking except at dinner. Slowly, as the paintings accumulated, dark at first, then gradually filling with color, my sister emerged from the character she'd been playing. She was funnier than I'd remembered, and smarter, and sadder. "I'm sorry," she said one evening as we sat on the beach. "For all of it, for every cruel thing I said, for making you the family punching bag, for being too weak to stand up for you or myself." "I know," I said. "I forgave you a long time ago." "Why?" "Because hating you was just another way of letting them control me, and because you were as much a victim as I was, just in a different way." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Grandmother would have been proud of you." "She would have been proud of both of us," I corrected, for finally being brave enough to be ourselves. Victoria's first art exhibition opened in Paris 3 years after she came to Monaco. She used her real name, but no one connected her to the Instagram influencer she'd once been. The paintings sold well. They were raw, honest, painful, and beautiful. The girl who had lived her entire life for external validation finally created something purely for herself. James never apologized. He went to prison for 18 months, came out, and started over in another city with another firm, probably making the same mistakes. My parents divorced, finally admitting that they'd been strangers living in the same house for decades. My mother moved to Arizona, and last I heard was teaching yoga and pretending she'd never been married. My father sold the house and moved into a small apartment in the city, where he spent his days reading the books he'd never had time for when he was building his empire of lies. And me? I kept writing, book after book, story after story, each one reaching more people who needed to hear that they weren't alone in feeling alone. I married Gabriel in a small ceremony on the beach below the villa, with just Victoria, Marie, Jacques, Celeste, and a few close friends attending. Eleanor Blackwood, who had become like a grandmother to me, officiated. "Do you ever regret it?" Gabriel asked me on our 5th anniversary, as we sat on the terrace watching the sunset. "Leaving the way you did?" I thought about the helicopter ride, about the letter on my pillow, about the family I'd left behind and the life I'd built in its place. "Never," I said, "not for a single moment." And it was true. Victoria had been wrong that night at the party. I didn't die alone. I learned to live authentically, surrounded by people who loved me not for my performance or my family name, or even for grandmother's money, but for who I actually was. The girl who had been told she was nothing became everything she was meant to be. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, I know grandmother is watching and smiling, knowing that her plan worked perfectly. She saved me, she gave me wings, and I flew. And Kai.